Hi, everyone. I am Wendy Batts here with my co-host and friend, Dr. Marty Miller. And on this episode, we are talking about bridging the gap when your clients don't fit the textbook. And I think we can all relate at one point in time. If you are new to training, this is going to happen to you. If you are a veteran trainer listening to us, first of all, thank you for doing so. But this is also probably going to spark up some different thoughts like, good point.
Yeah, this is, taking that textbook, learning the science, but really now, how do I apply it for whoever's going to come in? And you never know what you're getting when that next client walks in the door. So I promise you, this will be an episode you do not want to miss to help take your career to the next level. And please like, follow, subscribe, give us that 5-star review, but most importantly, enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Master Instructor Roundtable. I am Wendy Batts here with my friend and co-host, Dr. Marty Miller. As always, Marty, how are things?
Good. Looking forward to this topic. I saw when you threw this one across, I'm like, this needs to be discussed.
This needs to happen. And guys, we are talking about when clients don't fit the textbook, which when people walk through that door, you have something in mind, like this person's going to want this, and this, and they're going to move like this unbelievable piece of machinery. And then they come in, the goals are different than you thought they were going to say. And the squat might show something different. So then you get into it and you're like, okay, based on what the textbook says, this is what I foam roll, stretch. These are the exercises that I want. And then they come and tell you, well, when I do this, it hurts. I don't like this. And this is the days that I want to work out. And it's completely different. So that is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, this happens more than a lot, so it's going to be something you deal with all the time. So Wendy, we're going to let you jump in here and intro kind of the key points and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Real clients. This is reality, guys, but real clients don't always follow perfect training models. And that's where true coaching begins. Remember, we are coaches and we have to be able to kind of pivot when we need to, and then stay focused and on track when everything is moving the way that we are hoping it does, meaning we're seeing the results in the timeline that we're hoping for. How do you navigate chronic pain, post-rehab challenges, and inconsistent compliance? We're going to talk a little bit about that. Knowing when to adapt, when to reassess, and when to refer out to best serve the client, and then blending science, intuition, and empathy to meet clients where they are.
Just a few things.
Kind of important.
Yeah. So, we teach in the textbook, and what I'm going to say, almost a perfect world scenario. In the textbook, you're going to find chapters on client relations and other things, but we have to apply science in a little bit of a linear manner, right? So you really understand, what does the heart do? What is different type of training? What are the physiological responses? In your continuing education, and hopefully with this other content we put out from NASM, be it podcasts, et cetera, you get to start to understand the nuances. But again, we have to, in the text, test you in kind of what I'll say more of a straight line, what the science shows. How you apply the science is the art of it, right? So, when you look at the textbooks, you're going to see very structured and outlined progressions. Real clients will bring in variability. Some days they're going to feel great. Some days they're not. They're going to miss a couple weeks. They're going to have a couple weeks where everything's, spot on with their sleep, their rest, their nutrition, and you can advance them a little quicker. So it's just having that ability to always make modifications in real time. The perfect OPT phase plan rarely stays perfect. So just be prepared for that and understand that the model is flexible, right? I can always down-regulate my programs. I can always up-regulate my programs. I can use micro-progressions and regressions, exercise to exercise. So don't worry about it, but really look at it for how it is designed, that we're going to teach you the right way. And then you're going to learn, like a chef, how to go in the kitchen and create your best version of it following a recipe.
Yeah. And I think you said something that's really important is if you're in the textbook and you're looking at program design and it's like, okay, you know what, I reassessed there, let's say in phase 3, and you're having them lift heavy, you're going to push them to the 6 or 7 rep that day. You have it in your head and you have it on paper that this is the proper progression for that day. And they come in 3 days a week. And let's say, on Monday, you did a stabilization day, that everything should be perfectly aligned and ready to go. And then they come in and they tell you that they ended up going for a 4-hour hike, or they went for a run and got lost and ended up running further and longer than they had planned, or they ended up having to go out to some social event and wear high heels and their back is sore. All of these things happen. To Marty's point, you're going to have to then be able to, on the fly, take that phase 3 workout that you had in your mind was going to be the perfect workout for that day and say, okay, what can we do to make her feel better and move better right now? Because you're just going to have to be able to shift. And so I think it's important to understand that as you go up the model, you're sometimes going to have to go back down. And at that point, when you have written all your programs out, it's easy to go back into the archive and pull something out that you've done, maybe make a couple adjustments based on weight. But it's really important to know that client well enough to know exactly what to do to help them.
Yeah. And think about it, that's why they're paying us, right? To be that fitness professional so we can adjust in real time. We all use different levels of professionals throughout our life, whether it's your dentist, your doctor, you expect them to treat you with the best understanding of you as an individual and what their best understanding of the application of the skill set you're hiring them for, right? So we're the same, just you got to be willing to understand that when a person walks in the door, first question is be like, how are we doing today? And just be ready to adjust on the fly. But that's the fun of it as well, I think.
Oh, well, Marty, you keep bringing up doctors every once in a while. I know in some of our podcasts, and in total side note, but this is like when the clients don't fit the textbook. It's also when the doctors don't fit the textbook, meaning as a trainer, if you are not like dialed in on your client, they're going to pick up on that. Because I know me as a patient walked in to see a specialist that I was told I had to go to, but I didn't even feel like it. And she walks in and says, okay, why are you here? So I asked her, well, you tell me, why am I here? That was a really awkward way to meet a specialist that I'm like, this is a joke. And I never went back. I mean, same thing. This is how people are going to look at us as trainers. If I'm like, okay, well, what are we doing today? You tell me. I'm paying you to know.
Exactly.
So why did the gap exist? Well, guys, think about this. People come in with chronic pain and prior injuries. Now, again, we're not doctors. We're here to talk about discomfort. But I mean, if there is chronic pain and a physician or there was some sort of a release saying, listen, you need to get on a really good exercise regimen because that will help you get out of maybe some of this pain by getting the right muscles to fire at the right time and the right plane of motion. Does that sound familiar? Again, from the textbook. Then that's where we can kind of come into play. Inconsistent attendance or motivation. Guys, again, if the client's not motivated and they're not really dialed in on their fitness journey, and it can be something that has nothing to do with you, but just them in general, then again, they're not going to every 4 to 6 weeks see all the progressions that we're hoping for, because to Marty's point that he said in other shows and podcasts too, if we're committing into 3 times a week, I want to see these specific results, but I also expect them to do things on their own. If they're not motivated to do things on their own, and that kind of brings us into the non-compliance, and they want me to do everything in 3 hours. I mean, there's a lot of hours within 1 week, and I see them for 3 of them. We have to have to sit down and talk, but just understand life stresses and fatigue and non-compliance is a big thing. And then of course, post-rehab limitations, there are going to be certain things that maybe they're not allowed to do yet. And you're going to have to work on work on that within your programming. Again, medical conditions, that can be a big thing. Considerations, are they on certain medications? Because the way that certain medications work with the body sometimes can make someone feel really tired. It can also make them gain weight, make them lose weight. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. And that's one thing I love about the book is it gives you all of these things to think about. But if you look in the book, it doesn't tell you exactly what you're going to have to do for that.
Yeah. And everybody's lived life, right? So everybody's going to have something. And even if you train youth today, they might have had something, whether it's bad posture from playing video games, being on their phone, carrying the big backpacks. So just be prepared that that's why you're there, to evaluate, address, assess. And, it's the assessment process is kind of session by session based on what's going on in their life at that period of time.
Indeed.
Things change. So here's the key thing. And Wendy, you and I must have covered this over the last 5 years, 10,000 times, no matter what the topic of the podcast is the OPT model is a framework, or what I like to say sometimes is it's my toolbox. Then I put my tools where they belong in the toolbox. There's tools that are great for stabilization training. There's tools that are great for strength and power training. There's different mobility techniques, but it's a linear progression. It gives you an idea on the best way to move people along. It's a framework. It's not necessarily a formula. So you're allowed to manipulate things and slide through it based on the individual in front of you. You can adapt phases based on readiness. For me, if I started training with somebody brand new, they've never done anything, where I'm going to start them in stabilization. But I get somebody who's got a good strength or a good, maybe a Pilates background or yoga background. They may not need a ton of time in the stabilization phase because that's what they've been doing, but they're going to need more, progression. Or maybe it only takes 2 weeks to get to strength. So, we don't want you to jump ahead, but we want you to understand that it's not so rigid that, you got to spend 4 to 6 weeks in stabilization. Not necessarily if you own it, right? So, but men don't stay in the strength phase for the next 4 to 6 decades. Like that's where guys tend to stay, move around and it'll benefit you. So blend these areas together: stabilization, strength, and power, undulating. And Wendy, again, we can, in the show notes, we can always post some of our other podcasts, but I warm up with stabilization. And then sometimes I'll do strength and power back to, a superset. And then I might finish with the stabilization phase when I'm fatigued. So you have a ton of flexibility if you understand the science and truly what you're trying to accomplish that day, that week, that month for the individual in front of you.
Well, and I think it's important when we talk about blending the stabilization, strength, and power, again, they've earned the right, as Marty always says, like they've worked their way up. So if they started in stabilization, they built a good foundation, you reassess, they're ready to move up into strength. They look great in strength, you reassess, and they're ready to get into power. Then, as Marty just said, there may be one workout that blends all three. There may be a week where it's like starting in Monday is phase 2. On Wednesday, it's power. And then on Friday, it's phase 1 to make sure that they move well over the weekend. So then you can start all over again. So you can play and vary with it. But if somebody hasn't gotten to power and they're in the strength phases, then you're only going to undulate from the stabilization to strength or play around with whatever phases you have, quote, graduated from, because you want to do that to be successful. You want to every once in a while go back to phase 1 and phase 2 just to ensure that the stabilizers are firing when they're supposed to with the prime movers. You've got the integrity of the shoulder capsule as well as the hip capsule firing in the right places and good alignment, maintaining the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. So when we talk about flexibility within the structure, yes, but you also want to be smart to just ensure that, if I threw somebody in power because they like to move fast and that's all they know how to do, they might be good at it, but they have no control over their spine and what everything else is doing. So I'm actually setting them up for potential injury if I'm not careful versus making sure that they have a sound and structure foundation first.
That's the beautiful thing about the models. It's your best friend, as we've said many times. Just learn it, so then you have the ability to adapt it with each one of every client, no matter what's happening that day, that week, that month.
Yeah. So Marty, before we move on, I want to say that this episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off all certifications and specializations. Access free CEUs and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. All right, Marty, tell us about the safely and effectively adapting to the book.
Yeah, so you guys have also heard me say that the first thing I focus on is do no harm, right? My job as a fitness professional is to get people through workout safely. Doesn't mean I don't challenge them. Doesn't mean they don't get fatigued. Doesn't mean they walk out thinking, wow, that was a great workout. But I'm doing things from a program design standpoint, whether it's an individual exercise that I don't like biomechanically for them, whether it's a phase of training they're not ready for. My job is to guide them through this journey and prevent setbacks or injuries. And like I said, when you have people that come in, have living life, you need to understand, someone who's had a back injury before, somebody who has, maybe Achilles tendonitis. Doesn't mean you can't train them. It just means maybe they're not ready to jump. Maybe they're not the best for a back squat, even if they're in the strength phase, understanding how to manipulate around it. But it's going to come back first with movement quality, right? Wendy, my passion is movement quality, movement health, getting people to move better first so then they can move more often. They can move more often under load, and then they can move more often under load or at high speed. But you got to get them to move well first. And your clients will feel confident when they're not sore and achy and they understand what's happening. And you'll get more buy-in on those correctives or some of those other exercises when they see the value in doing them. We don't push through pain, right? The no pain, no gain is ridiculous. Pain receptors are there to tell you something's wrong. Fatigue, burning is okay, right? As long as it fits the right sets, reps, tempo, etc. But pain is unacceptable, right? That's not part of training. So you need to modify and regress. And then collaborate with medical or rehab professionals. I highly suggest you have people in your network because they're not going to want to do what you do in the gym. So now you're not only adding value to your client and covering yourself from a liability standpoint, you've got a way to feed yourself new business as well. So I think these things are critically important.
And the one thing too, Marty, we talk about this all the time, or we used to when we were doing our workshops, is the book is going to give you the rep ranges. They're going to give you different percentages. And so, for example, like when you're doing max strength, it'll say 1 to 5 repetitions, 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max, basically. So if you're 1 to 5, so that would be about 85%. So if I tell you that I want you to do 5 reps as heavy as you can, and you could do 6, then it's still too light. However, same thing when we get to power, right? Now it's a superset. So it's still that rep range. And then there's a certain percentage of, let's say, a medicine ball weight. Well, if you have someone that is a senior, let's say active older client, and she needs to learn how to move fast as well, right? We don't usually make phase 5 optional for a reason, because we have to train the body to adapt to life, and speed is a part of life. You're going to have to run across the street every once in a while. You may have to stop a grandchild and grab them quickly, so you have to be reactive. You've got to be able to do different things. But it doesn't mean at that point that I have to follow the exact percentages for different people. So it's important to understand when Marty and I are talking about that it's not rigid and it's a guide, that it really is going to depend on the client. But just because that client may not need to do a 1 rep max doesn't mean they don't need to lift heavy. Because as we talked about with sarcopenia, and especially as we age, it's important that we lift heavy. But we want to lift heavy safely, and we want to move fast on what we can control. So it's not moving as fast as possible. It's under control always. And so it's okay to modify that. They're still going to build adaptations of power and strength. It's going to be a little bit different than if you're working with a professional athlete that needs to hit those specific guidelines of a 1 rep max and 100% of what they can do at speed.
Yeah. We all want to be stronger, but we can be stronger within a functional capacity that makes sense for us.
Yes.
So here we're going to talk about when progress isn't linear, right? I love the picture. So if you're watching, you'll see a straight line under success, what people think it looks like. And then there's this squiggly line that eventually gets up to the right. And it's really what it more looks like. So, it just totally describes life well. I've always said life's not a straight line, right? There's zigzags, ups, downs, but hopefully if you're pushing hard, you're getting that upward momentum to the right. And, that goes to many things in this industry. But when you look at assessments, sometimes this is why there's an inconsistency, because you're training somebody in a phase of training or with movement compensations that haven't been fully addressed or they haven't corrected, so you're really just putting volume and stress on somebody that's not ready for it. So there you have to reassess, figure out the programming the correct way and give them what they need. Sometimes, as you know, that's not what they want, but that's what is going to make the change. And then scale back either the volume or complexity. And, Wendy, we're both got a nice sinus infection right now. I've been traveling for the last 6 weeks. on paper, today might've been a training day, but I purposely just did mobility and some level, zone 1 cardio. Because even though on paper today was a phase 2, not with the recovery that I had matched up. So I had to adjust. And then, focusing on wins, how often people come, the mindset, the effort, let them know that this is a long-term, lifelong journey, and you're going to have these undulations in the consistency in your program. You might hit a plateau here and there. Address it, look at the why, and then let them know that that's part of the process. But then your programming should be able to get them to that next step.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast, and I actually have a shirt because I love it. And they talk about, it literally is an arrow, and it goes up, and then it makes like a 90-degree angle, and then it goes straight up. And their big thing is just that, Marty. You're moving forward, not straight. So life isn't always, like you said, straight, but as long as you're making the forward progress, that's something that's a win. And you've got to look at all of that as that mindset. And you want to get that across with your clients as well.
100%.
So knowing when to pivot.
It's in my head. That's the picture you should have put up for our
I thought about it, but then I was like, you know what? I'm trying to be professional.
No, you should have put it up.
Integrity of NASM here. But it's really knowing when to pivot, seriously, when to adapt, making minor tweaks to solve performance issues. If you see that someone is really struggling with the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, their left foot keeps slightly turning out, and you've corrected it, but it keeps going back, then maybe you need to correct yourself with the choices that you're making to help them get stronger, to alleviate that foot external rotation or whatever it may be. So again, you want to make tweaks that are appropriate. If something happens and somebody does have pain and this dysfunction keeps persisting, no matter what you're doing, if you're focusing specifically on muscles, which is what we target, and you're not seeing someone get better, or they still are having these aches and pains, guys, refer out. Have them go visit with their physician. Maybe they have to get an MRI. Maybe there's something that you're not seeing. Maybe it's something that they didn't know they had. And if that's not the case and you think it's a joint thing, then send them to a chiropractor. Maybe they can help unlock a joint or release a joint that has been so chronically locked up for so long that it would take a long time to get better range of motion, even though you're doing the right things. So it's okay to refer out, and then always reassess. People are like, oh, we're big into the assessments. Well, we're also big into reassessing, because when the data or the feedback starts to change for the positive, you're on the right track. If it doesn't change, then you know that there's something that still needs to be targeted. And if you're going in a backwards direction, then you definitely want to think, okay, you're progressing them too much. That reassessment is your information as a trainer on how you're helping that client get better, or are you just stagnant and you are not going to help them reach their goal on the timeline that you promised.
Yeah, well said. It's one of those things where, we want perfect. It's not going to happen. And that's why people are going to rely on us and want to use our services, because they know there's days they roll in going, oof, I don't have it today. And if you make the magic happen, they're like, wow, I'm so glad I showed up. Right. And that's the fun part of doing this, because you can really give someone an experience that they didn't expect to have. And sometimes it's on their most tired, worst days.
100%. Coaching beyond the program, empathy and communication drives results. Guys, it's good to be empathetic. When somebody tells you something, it's good to show that you care about them. Now, again, don't go down that rabbit hole too much, because then they'll come up with a bunch of excuses. But true empathy and open communication is what helps build that rapport, and I think is extremely important. The hardest thing for trainers, it was hard for me too, is listening, right? Listen, be an active listener to your client, because you're listening for cues beyond the movement patterns. If someone's complaining about something and you're not listening and you're not taking in consideration that maybe the exercise that you're having them do can start to cause certain inflammation or certain things that maybe you forgot about, which hopefully that's not the case, but maybe there's certain things that they're more prone to. You have to listen to what they're saying. And always, you want to build trust before intensity. Before you start getting so crazy in some of your exercise selections and everything, you want them to trust you. You want them to know that you are an educated personal trainer that is there to scientifically provide evidence-based exercises and programming for them to hit their goals. That's like the one thing that if you can get that without, they don't care about, don't vomit at the mouth of how smart you are. Okay. Because that's going to get you nowhere. But if you can honestly have that open communication, like, listen, when your foot's turning out, then this is also kind of what's happening at the hip. And there's one particular muscle that sits right next to that sciatic nerve. And sometimes when it gets compressed, it may cause these little crazy things to happen. So why don't we try to relieve that type of muscle or that muscle first and see if we can get it from pinching on that nerve. Let's just try it. See how easy that was versus like, this is the origin and insertion and the attachments, and this is what it does. Nobody cares. No one cares, but you need to know that. So you have to be able to apply it and speak to it on a simple level.
Yeah, people love when you can make the complex simple, right? So that's the job, that's the goal. So coaching beyond the program, as we continue that, a lot of clients are in the mid-40s. They're going to have the traditional low back pain, knee pain. They might be sporadic in their training. This is very common, right? So how do you keep them motivated? How do you, maybe if they're only training once a week, you give them homework to do, right? Whatever it takes to keep them on their journey as best as they can. And then when you look at the adaptation, regression to controlled tempo squats, mobility focus, right? You're going to have to change the program based on what this individual can do. You're going to find a lot of ex-athletes, weekend warriors, people who beat themselves up in their 20s and maybe beyond, or now they sit at desks, have bad posture, and they're still going to want to train. So how do you create a training environment that they enjoy, but still working towards fixing them and getting them better? And then the key result here is increased consistency and confidence. And first is, can you reduce even some of that discomfort that they're having? So then they're more willing to want to do more because they correlate, hey, if I start moving and moving better, I started feeling better. Why would I not want to continue and see where my fitness journey can take me?
Yeah. If you can have someone get out of pain, guys, I mean, first of all, they will not want to leave you, but then you also, I mean, I go home and I like, oh, that was so good. That was so good. I saw a client this morning, Marty, and I mean, it was one of those, he came in because he had back pain. And when I looked at his hips, I'm like, what have you been doing? And he had just seen someone the day before that's like, well, they never even looked at this. I'm like, so assessments can play a huge role in helping someone feel better. And it really does go a long way.
Yeah, those little things make a huge, huge difference in your level of service to your clients. So as we look at the key takeaways, we got to talk about bridging the gap and make it human-centered coaching, right? The client is the focus. It's all about what matters to them and how you're going to get them to where they need to be. And maybe doing a little education and nudging as you go, because they may not know. Training models are guides, people teach, right? So as we said with the model it's a guide, it's a roadmap. Learn it, understand it, so you know how to navigate people through this fitness journey. Progress is better than perfection. You're not going to get perfection. That's okay. You're not going to get perfect movement. You're not going to get perfect attendance. You're not going to get perfect sessions, but the conglomeration of your efforts over time is going to get them up and to the right, as we like to say in the business world. So there's massive progress. And then how do you define success, right? It's adaptability and empathy, understanding that what you had planned may not be what you deliver, and being empathetic to the person that's in front of you. Because at the end of the day, they're a human who go through life and their struggles, and they all have their things. And sometimes they use our sessions as an escape from that. So don't forget that. Make them work, but be empathetic to the individual in front of you.
100%. Well, Marty, this was one that I when we were talking about it, we were saying, well, you know what? This person is way far different than what we had expected. And it's definitely not something we saw in the textbooks, with, I think, triggered you to say, hey, we need to do something on that. And I'm like, let me put that together, because I had all of this stuff in mind. So thank you for the idea, by the way. But guys, if you have any questions, or there's certain podcast ideas that you want Marty and I to talk about. If you are reading that textbook and maybe you do have a client that doesn't fit the textbook, always feel free to contact one of us and we will do our best to either have another podcast or show about it, or at least get back to you to help you if you feel like there are times you're struggling. So if you ever want to contact me directly, you can find me at wendy.batts13 on Instagram, or you can email me at wendy.batts@nasm.org.
And my info is right here, dr.martymiller72 on Instagram, and email is marty.miller@nasm.org. So Wendy, can't thank you enough for putting this together. I know that it was valuable, even just some refreshes for me and some aha moments that I had in my career. Hopefully that translate, or I know I'm going to say it's just going to translate well to our audience. For all of you that can consistently watch us, we can never thank you enough. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and please give us that 5-star review. And of course, we can't wait to see you on the next episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable.